All right, so we're recording now, so go ahead. If anyone has a question later on, let me know.
Okay, great. So as I said, I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint with you, and there's a lot of, it's kind of a wide screen. So if you want to minimize the view so you can see the PowerPoint, do that, as well as keeping yourself on mute until we get to the questions. So let me share my screen. Just bear with me a sec. All right, here we go. So 19 roadblocks to effective one-way video interviewing. Why is this page down not working? Hang on one second. I'm having a small technical issue. It doesn't want to page forward. All right. So here we go. My intro to one-way video interviewing, it started at the Temple Network Community Job Seekers meeting in Franklin Lakes. That meeting is no longer there, but there was a man, Jerry Crispin, who was talking. I'm sure several of you have heard him speak. And he mentioned that there was these companies out there that were performing these remote interviews, and they were collecting all of this analytical data, and they were measuring 14 points on your face to determine how well you functioned under stress. And I left that meeting somewhat bewildered and somewhat intrigued. So I started to perform my own research to find out more about what these one-way video interviews were, what some of their the pros and the cons of them are, some of the tips and tricks. And I also applied for a job. I prepped for my own one-way video interview, and I completed that. And to be completely upfront, this style of interview was an absolute episode of extreme anxiety for me. I did not like it. I did not do well. I ended up failing the interview, which is okay. I used it as a practice. I used it as a lesson learned. And that's why I'm here today, because I documented those lessons learned, and I'm here to share them with you so you can become a more confident communicator when you do your interview. So, as I said, I did this job search meeting, I had research, I did my interview, and now I've documented my lesson learned. So really, what are one-way video interviews? In contrast to two-way video interviews, where there's a dialogue that you can have, you can see the other person. One-way video interviews are technology-based. So what does this mean? It means they use your personal computer, your tablet, your phone. All of this allows the interviewer to record your video responses to pre-built interview questions. It's also asynchronous, meaning that it includes some computer-controlled timing protocols. And in fact, there are two protocols. There's a question reading timer and a video recording timer. So when the question timer ends, the video recording timer begins. And when the video recording timer ends, the question timer begins. It also includes artificial intelligence. So it uses the data that it captures from the interviewer's device to automatically generate what they call an employability score. And that score gets ranked against other applicants. And there are many, many data points which can be captured. Among them are word choice, facial movement, and speaking voice. They're also flexible. So they frequently replace the phone screen. Interview questions can be customized for the job level. They're commonly used immediately after an applicant submission to evaluate compatibility, but they can actually be used at any point during the hiring cycle. And they're also on demand. So on-demand interviews are also synonymous with what you might hear called on-demand is a synonym for one-way video interviews. You might also hear them called robot interviews. But generally, they can be completed in a location and a time of your choosing. So my experience with the one-way video interview came from a company called HireVue. My HR department contracted with them to provide remote interactive video interview. The interview process started when I received an email from HireVue, but I was leery, right? My company never told me I was going to receive an interview from this or an email from this company, and I thought it was spam. Others have told me a very similar message. And one person even said they actually missed the deadline because they thought it was spam and they just ignored the email. So the HireVue interview is programmed to be one way. This means, or meant for me and for you actually, that there is no one that you can build rapport with. There's no one that you can read facial expressions from. And there's no one to ask any questions of. Instead, the only interaction you have is with the faceless dot. You know, dot, that little circle that's recording your video. And Dot and I just didn't see eye to eye. As I mentioned, most of my interaction with Dot was quite agonizing. And this is why I'm sharing my lessons with you, so that you can show Dot who's boss. Now, HireVue is not the only company or firm that produces one-way video interviews. Just very quickly, there's VidRecruiter, Spark Hire, Alio, Interview Stream, RecRight, My Interview, Outmatch. But HireVue boasts that more than 1 million job seekers have taken their AI one-way based video interviews. They claim that 700 employers globally are using their system, including 40% of Fortune's most respected companies, such as Hilton, Unilever, BASF, Kohler, Carnival Cruise Line, Tiffany's, and CVS is using it as well. Now, there are some benefits for the employer. They have increased efficiency to plan and schedule their interviews. So they can send a single email to multiple candidates, so it reduces the hours that they need for scheduling and conducting phone interviews. They have repeated viewing capability. So a manager and an HR person and a peer can all view the same interview. You don't need all that extra time. They can actually easily bypass a candidate. So if they evaluate your video and they say, oh no, this person's not right, they can just send an automated email and on to the next for them. But you know, that their benefit is that they can spend more time pursuing better candidates, and they can offer near immediate decline emails. So at least you're not in that black hole. There is anonymity of reviewers. So you don't really know who's actually reviewing your video. And they have no obligation to give you any feedback. You don't even know who to contact, right? So there's candidate dashboards. They get reporting analytics that they're obtained from the interview. And lastly, they can issue a branded message. So welcome to company XYZ. And similarly at the end. There are a few benefits for HR. So it allows them to extend the hiring pool outside of their normal area, which especially in COVID is getting more prevalent. So anyone with a phone or an internet connection can actually apply. They claim it can shrink the hiring time by up to 6 weeks. I've heard as little as 5 days they can hire someone. They can offer the same questions to all the candidates. So it seems more fair in that perspective. And they claim that the AI tech picks up some of the clues that the recruiters miss. So if you're enthusiastic or you look stressed, it'll pick up those clues. And it steers the managers away from hiring what they call mini-me's. It steers the managers to get the most highly rated candidates versus somebody that's just like them. And then it saves the company money over in-person interviews. Now, there are a few benefits for the job seeker. In my opinion, not that many, but there is flexibility to interview on your own schedule. It can eliminate all interview-related travel. And you're more familiar with your own tech device, so you're using your own computer, your own phone, or your own tablet. And I will be discussing the actual roadblocks shortly, but first I want to show you what happens during a one-way video interview, but I'm going to also stop here and see if anybody has a quick question. Okay, I'll move on. All right, so what happens? Oops. How did we get here? Okay, so let's explore what happens during a one-way video interview. So generally you get a brief welcome message or ask you to follow a bunch of prompts, and then the interview question pops up on your screen. This is the asynchronous part where the timer starts and you have a pre-programmed amount of time to read the question plus notice your allotted response time. When the clock runs out on the question, then the video auto starts and this sequence continues until you've completed all the questions. At some point, at the end, a thank you message appears. And now the video becomes available for your employer to review. So post-interview, the HR reps and the recruiters and the managers also get statistics, analytics that highlight your position against others, but you don't get any live feedback. So we'll go more into some of this in a bit, but I just want to speak a little bit about candidate scoring. So HireVue claims that they can dissect the tiniest little detail of a candidate's response to create what they call a calculated score. Their standard 30-minute interview can yield up to 500,000 data points, including facial expression, which is 29% of the score, and that includes eye contact. And also word choice and audio feature, that accounts for the rest, so 71% of the score. They also rate candidates on their willingness to learn, their conscientiousness and responsibility, their personal stability and coping skills, problem solving, and more. So this all results in a likelihood of success score that gets reported to the company so that they can decide who the best candidate is to hire. Now, one criticism of the AI candidate scoring is that it can usually make a one-size-fits-all judgment for each candidate, even though cultural differences, cultural diversity can impact how a person responds, behaves, or sounds. So there's a bit of a slippery slope here. Meredith Whitaker, which is the co-founder of AI Now, says, "It's a profoundly disturbing development that we have a proprietary technology that claims to differentiate between a productive worker and a worker who isn't fit based on their facial movements, their tone of voice, and their mannerisms." She claims it's a license to discriminate, with no input from the lives of the peoples whose opportunities are being shaped by these systems. So now is a good time to pause and see if anyone has any questions. If not, we'll go into the 19th.
Donna, there were a couple of questions that came up.
Okay.
So, there's a question. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Donna, one of the questions from Mike Whalen was, who would use the one-way video?
Oh, hi, Mike. One-way video is being used by a number of companies right now to, quickly evaluate candidates' likelihood of success for a position. So as I mentioned earlier, companies like Cole and Tiffany's and Carnival Cruise Line and even CVS are using the one-way video interview to specifically evaluate candidates for any type of job position, senior managers, customer service rep, all different types of positions.
So can the video be previewed before being submitted by the person on this end?
No, there are some cases where you have an opportunity to re-record an answer, but you do not have an opportunity to preview the video in its entirety.
One other question for now specifically, what about eyeglasses, wearing those versus
We
not?
will get to that. That's part of one of the things, but if you need, and I'll mention it here and again later, but if you need them, and I generally keep them on my head because I can't read with them, but if you need reading glasses, you have to wear them because you need to see what's being popped up on the screen.
Okay, thanks.
One more question, Donna, before you move on. Again, from Mike Whalen is, what is the time allowed to answer the question?
And we will also get into that, but it varies. It varies by question. So let me get into my roadblocks and you will hear the answer if you don't mind waiting for a minute. Excuse me one second. Okay, so I am going to ask, what is this thing not going forward again? Okay. My question to you is, who can tell me what the #1 biggest mistake with one-way video interviews is? I want some guesses, please. Anybody?
I'm guessing not looking in the camera.
Okay, that's one option, but not my #1 biggest. Anybody else?
Audio or video quality?
That is a roadblock as well, but not my #1.
Not smiling.
Not smiling is a roadblock, but not my #1 either.
Not professionally dressed up?
Thank you for that, but nope, that's not my number one either.
Not
So,
looking at your camera, but looking at your screen.
another good roadblock, but nope. So let me give you my number one biggest mistake. Most video interview platforms offer a one-time practice session. My HireVue interview had 3 questions that I could practice with. Now, the number one roadblock that I found was taking that practice interview immediately before the live interview. And here's what's going to happen if you do. As you progress through the interview, you're going to start to think back to the points that you mentioned earlier. But then you're going to have these blurred lines between what you spoke about during the real interview versus what you spoke about during the practice interview. And this is going to throw you off your game. You will miss key points you intended to share because you thought you already said them. And you did, but only during the practice interview. And that AI camera is going to capture that look of horror that you have while you're trying to figure it out. So if you run into a situation where you thought you might have said something before, just stop, breathe, and repeat yourself. You know, video interview firms' policies, though, do vary on whether or not they share your practice interview. So RecRight's website says that the hiring managers can see your videos only after you click the send button. But again, take that practice interview at a time separate, just so you get the idea of what it feels like and you're not confusing your real interview with the practice interview. So that's roadblock number one. Now, for the introverts in the room, you know, especially the anxious, introverted, the mere idea of interviewing is a huge step outside of your comfort zone. And video interviewing in particular, one-way video interviewing where you have no, sorry?
I don't know. She's talking about interviewing.
Did it,
Okay.
no worries.
Okay. Video interviewing, especially this one-way video interviewing, where you have no feedback, you know, just elevates your stress tremendously. It's like what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler wrote about in their book on grief and grieving and the 5 stages of grief. First, you're in denial, like, I don't have to take an interview like this. Then your anger, like, this is so annoying. Why am I going to interview like this? And then you're bargaining, like, isn't there somebody that I can just talk to in person? Then you get depressed. You're like, I'm going to be stuck in my old job forever. I can't interview like this. And then you come to an acceptance, like, this is not fun, but okay, I'm going to do this interview. Now, one-way video interviews are very challenging. And so I recommend that you try them out with what I call C-level jobs, not like CEO level, but C-level as in ABC jobs that you don't really care about that much, just to get a feel for them. All right, moving on. Now, we know that interviewing is an art form with built-in bias to the best communicators, and video interviews are no exception. You must address the interviewer's questions in a crisp, clear manner, highlighting your best self and the undeniable value that you bring to the table. Now, while the jury is out if the best communicators make the best hires, and I say no, you must plug on because the interviewer saw something on your resume that appealed to them. But there are other biases that they pick up from these interviews. And not so much unlike a regular face-to-face interview, but what you look like, what your age is, your race, your gender, your environment, your clothes choice, how you handle pressure. So I encourage you to practice, practice, practice so that you can be an effective video interviewer. And I spoke to a woman, not in HR, but someone who actually has seen video interviews from the other side. And she says, just they want to see authenticity. They want to see your personality. They don't want you to be cold and scared. They want you to show some personality in your interview, as well as being able to answer the questions correctly. Okay, moving on. So whenever you interview, it's important for you to paint a picture for the interviewer to highlight just what they'll be getting when they hire you. So for example, if you're interviewing for a sales position, you want to paint a picture of all the new accounts and all the additional revenue you'll bring in. And so this means that your word choices count, right? And many of those word choices don't feel natural, even in a face-to-face interview, but let alone talking to Dot, it feels even worse. But do remember that videoing is a sales job, is a sales event. You're selling yourself. And for one-way video interviews, you have to practice enough so that you're comfortable painting that picture without the benefit of any immediate feedback, no facial expressions, no nothing. And it can be a real challenge the first time, but it will get easier, especially if you practice. Now, the next roadblock is what I call no body. Again, it does take some time to feel comfortable talking on video. And I was fortunate to have a friend who was prepping for a different style of interview at the same time I was prepping for my video interview. And so we agreed to support each other through an interview process, practice process, and we set up daily calls on video. And so, having a friend, a job seeker, or a coach to practice with on the video interviewing is really important. And they have, free software, the Zoom and the WebEx have some free accounts, so you get 40 minutes. But if it's only 2 people, you can stay on longer. So, but it literally took me like 3 days to feel confident on video, answering the question, why do you feel you're the right person for the job? So if you've never done a video interview before, then I just highly recommend that you find someone to practice with. But here's another tip for you. If you don't have anybody, you can put Post-its on the back of your computer, and you can make smiley faces, you can put googly eyes, you can put a little stuffed animal, something up there that at least you feel like you're not talking to yourself. Now, pressure. A long, long time ago, someone convinced HR departments around the globe that how well you handle the pressure of an interview is an actual reflection of how well you work. And while it is an indicator, I wholeheartedly disagree. Think for a second about an EMT worker with a fear of public speaking, or a brilliant computer engineer with social anxiety. They may be amazing, innovative workers, but just have terrible interview skills. Now, one-way video interviews, they capture the metrics from your facial expression and provide the employer that feedback on how well you respond under pressure. And that in itself can add pressure. So the best time that you can practice feeling that pressure is actually before you interview. So you want to practice slow breathing, like inhaling for 4, holding it for 4, exhaling for 4, and holding it for 4, so that you can bring self-control when you're feeling anxious. Just basic counting can sometimes help. You know, you can do it silently if you're on the video, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Just, you're gonna count until you feel your body like sighing it out. You can use affirmations like, I got this. Or some kind of mantras like focus and finish. But again, you want to take the time to really get comfortable on video. Now, gestures. The higher view software that I used had an outline for my head. Okay, so I was a little confused. Like, am I supposed to stick my head right in the outline? Well, we know that that's not the optimal position for being on camera, right? We want to see from the shoulders up. And also, this means that despite the research of the most well-liked TED.com talks that indicate that specific body language, you know, meaningful hand gestures, is an actual important factor in engagement and popularity of the most well-liked, you know, TED Talks, that you will be hard pressed to use gestures effectively in your interview, especially if you feel like you have to stick your head in that outline. So if you naturally talk with your hands, as some people do, you know, you want to practice what that looks like on camera. But one thing I will recommend is avoid blocking your face, right? You don't want to do that. You want to adjust your seat position, you know, push it back slightly if you need to, so you can get more of your body in that outline. And we also know that body language can offer clues and the tone of the words and the meaning of the intent. So the AI will be picking this up, so you really want to be purposeful in your body language and your tone. Now, here's a question that you probably never thought of in a face-to-face interview. What's on the wall behind you? This is one of the hidden questions that the interviewers want to know. So you might want to take a minute and ponder this before your actual interview. Do you have a cluttered mess on your desk? Is there a bunch of artwork from your kids on the fridge below? Or perhaps you're completely in the dark. So it's best to think of these things in advance before the actual interview and position your computer so you have a neutral wall behind you, simple decoration. You also want to ensure that your electronics is at eye level. So you may need a tripod or a book to put under your computer, but be sure that, you know, your device isn't wobbling like this, you know, especially if you're using some kind of handheld device. Now, you're in the middle of an interview and your mind goes blank. What happens? Well, of course, during an interview, you should be well versed on your own skills and readily available to answer the question, how well do you do X, Y, and Z? However, the pressure of interviewing and or getting questions you haven't prepared for can cause you to draw a blank. Now imagine what the person watching your video sees as if you as you stare off into space looking perplexed. Yeah. So take a breath and repeat yourself as needed. But whatever you do, avoid a long, prolonged stare. Just look at Dot and smile and put in some filler word, you know, like, hey, that's a great question, or, you know, it reminds me of another thing that I did. So keep in mind, though, there are no rules with a one-way video interview about what's behind your screen. And you can use this to your advantage, right? You can put bulleted notes behind your screen outside the view of the camera. You can split your screen with the notes on one side. You can use sticky notes on top of your computer. You can have a whiteboard behind your computer. The only thing is, I will encourage you to just keep it very simple, you know, large dots, large print, so that you can read it quickly, that you're not like glancing, wincing, trying to figure out what you wrote. But this is your interview to manage, and take advantage of it. Okay, so as mentioned, one-way video interviews have questions that pop on the screen, and you read the timed question and provide a timed answer. So I had 30 seconds for my question. Now, beware, though, that the questions can vary. So as long as the answer time can vary, right? So if you practice only answering 2-minute questions, what happens if you get a 4-minute question? What do you actually say when you run out of things to say? Do you say, well, that's all I have to say about that? Because to the untrained, that will be exactly what comes out of your mouth. And it came out of my mouth too, by the way. You know, so the trick is to practice timing yourself, answering questions, to learn when to edit, to learn when to expand. You might want to have a phrase that you can gracefully exit or end a question, because in the initial welcome message, they might tell you you don't have to use all of the time for the question. But what do? Do you sit there and smile at Dot? Do you look away? You bang your head like a V8? So you need to think about these things in advance. Otherwise, you'll just start second guessing yourself, and that AI is going to capture that utterly bewildered look. Now, some software companies, platforms, one-way video interview platforms say that they allow redos. When my daughter took an interview like this, she had one retry, but I did not. So, this thing is going on its own. I don't know what the heck's going on here. Sorry. All right. Now, as mentioned before, your questions are timed, and those times can vary. So what happens if you run over your allotted time? First of all, it can fluster you and throw you off your game, right? You have 2 minutes, but you start talking, you haven't finished your thought, and the AI is capturing this, and they do it intentionally, I'm telling you. So just remember that you only have a minuscule amount of time to shake off that overrun, right? You might only have 30 seconds because all of a sudden you have another question to read. So you got to just come back and act unapologetic, act like you meant to go over time, you know, just smile, move forward, act confident, but also practice in advance, running over time and quickly jumping to the next question. So shake it off quickly. Now, during the interview, one-way video interview, you have no one to ask questions of, and that's unlike a two-way interview, right? There's nobody who can say, hey, could you repeat that question, please? So, even though the interview question remains displayed on the screen for you to answer, consider for a second what happens when you get asked a multi-part question and you kind of forget what that second question is. What do? Do you turn your head and reread the question, staring over here at the left side of your screen? You know, will you just skip the missed question? Will you run out of time answering both parts of the question? Do you answer both questions at once? So just know that you have to have a plan for this. right? And you want to practice answering multi-part questions until you feel smooth, you can answer them smoothly. But this is part of their how well do you handle pressure kind of test. They're throwing things at you kind of discreetly. All right, so someone asked about professional dress or mentioned it as an issue. Yes, professional dress is important. And solid colors is important. It looks better on screen. You can add a pop of color, such as a scarf or a piece of jewelry to help it stand out. But whether you're male or female, if you have exceptionally shiny skin or, head, you can tone it down with a little bit of face powder. For the ladies, simple, tasteful makeup. Make sure you got no lipstick on your teeth. Now, for the eyeglass wearers, here we go. If you have to read with your eyeglasses, put them on, but you have a very limited time to put them on, take them off. So just figure out how you're going to work that. But you don't have much time, to change positions of your glasses, and you can leave them in your hand. Some people do that, but it can be a little distracting on video. So stuff to think about. All right, lights, camera, microphones. We're up to number 14. So lighting is behind you. Just put on the light, which means it's in front of you behind your device. That's what works best. But you want to play around for the best position. A swivel lamp makes it easier to find the right position. If not, you can still work things out with a little trial and error. But the most important thing is that you are not in the dark. So you might practice your interview during the day and everything's great with your lighting, but then you take your interview at night and all of a sudden the lighting is off. So consider when you plan to take the interview and then work your lighting that way. Now, your cameras can be built-in or external. The built-in should be fine. Just know where the position of your camera is. Most of the laptops have dot on the top, but there are some laptops that have dot on the bottom. So you have to adjust your computer accordingly. Similarly, microphones can be built-in or external. The built-ins are sufficient. However, there are particular people who want external mics, headsets, or just generally better equipment. But really, the most important thing is that they're turned on and tested for the interview environment. You also want to make sure you have a good connection, that if you're only using battery, that your batteries are charged. But I encourage you to plug in. Now, what happens if you have a cold or an allergy during your interview, as I did? If you're sniffling for any reason, you might want to think twice about interviewing. Otherwise, here's what it's going to sound like not quite attractive. So you need a plan. If you need a box of tissues, have them handy with you. But are you going to sneeze into the video camera? No. You're going to turn your head to the side and blow your nose. And if you can actually help it, you're going to wait until the next question is read. But again, you don't have much time. However, if you do have to have a runny nose and you need a tissue, you can say, "Excuse me," do your business, come back and say, "As I was saying." But remember, your clock is not stopping for your runny nose. Now, Spark Hire, a company, claims that you can actually stop your video and start at another time. I did not see this option with HireView, But if it is available to you and for some reason you choose to stop your interview and come back later, don't change your clothes, right? Because imagine how that's going to look in the middle of your interview. You start with one outfit and then finish with another. Very interesting. Okay. Now, the nicest part about a one-way interview is that you can schedule them at the time of your choosing. Okay, so if you're a 5 a.m. riser and you want to schedule your interview for 5 a.m., fantastic. Conversely, if you're a night owl and you want to interview late into the night, beautiful. Either way is just fine. However, right, the roadblock that you want to think about here is regardless of whether your interview is the day or the night, what is going to distract you? Ringing telephones, doorbells, family members walking through your video, barking dogs, cats walking across your computer, screaming or interrupting kids, construction noise, alarms on your phone, on your car that go off. So the bottom line is there are many potential distractions that need to be managed ahead of time to the best of your ability, right? So you control your environment and you have to take the steps to control it, right? So you want to manage the things that you can, like putting Fido and Fluffy in another room, sending the kids to grandma, turning down your phone volume, putting a do not disturb sign on your room, anything you can do, moving a car down the block if for some reason it has a tendency to go off. You know, you want to control the distractions, people, pets, and potential problems. Again, it's your interview to manage, so ask yourself, what potential disruptions can I manage in advance? And then take the time to manage them. Now, I have a question for you. Are you a swiveler? Do you swivel? You might want to think about that before you pick the chair that you're going to interview in, right? A straight back chair is good for the swivelers. If you can't stay still, that's what you need, because it doesn't look that well on the video when you're moving around. So you want to be comfortable. If you need a pillow to get to the eye level of the computer, then add a pillow. But again, try and stay still. Now we're up to number 18. Where's the feedback? There is no facial expression or body language to read with a video interview. So if you actually figure out how to build rapport with Dot, please let me know, because I did not figure this out, right? But you also get no immediate feedback from your interview. So you're kind of left a little bit bewildered at the success. You will get a thank you message that pops up on your screen. But if you lack the qualifications the interviewer seeks or fail to effectively convince Dot, then the only feedback you might get is in the form of a canned email that says they found a better candidate. So job seekers aren't told their scores, nor is there anyone that they can ask what they can do to do a better job next time. So if you want some kind of feedback, the only way you can do that is really kind of network to find the jobs in the hidden job market so you can bypass these types of interviews. Okay, so number 19. One-way interviews are not going away, especially with COVID now, they're only growing. One figure I read said that 60% of the hiring managers are using video interview, not necessarily one-way video interview, but they are, one-way is gaining traction. and they're quite pervasive in industries like hospitality and finance. They're, generationally, the Gen X, Y, millennials, they're a little bit more comfortable using video platforms than some of the baby boomers. So if you're less comfortable on video, another reason to practice. I do find them particularly hard to wing. So as mentioned, I do encourage you to practice and practice and practice some more. So if at all you're worried about downsizing or offshoring or layoffs or diseases impacting our future careers or artificial intelligence or machine learning or deep learning or robots taking over your job, or if you just want a new opportunity for that matter, then it's best to get cracking and start practicing for your one-way video interviews. Now I do have a bonus item here. It's important for you to figure out who you're interviewing for. If you complete a one-way video interview, make sure it's for a reputable company. You don't know who has access to your video. You don't know what they're going to do with your video. You don't know how long they're going to save your video. You don't know if an old video or even an old interview will prevent you from getting a future job. What recourse do you have if fraudsters get a hand on your video? Or even a headhunter. Will they headhunter send your video off? You need to be complete control of your interviews. You need to read the terms of agreement. You need to be aware and you need to be careful. And I did want to note that some interview platform companies say that you can request to delete a failed interview, which I encourage you to do, although your employer may actually still keep the interview. So if you're going to take this train ride, I would say to research the company well and pick the right opportunities. Of course, you can practice for the wrong opportunities, that's fine. Practice for the camera. You want to select your space wisely. You want to dress the part. You want to act naturally. You want to exhibit the best behaviors for the job. So what does that mean? So companies are they look at their existing employees, right? Their attitudes and their behaviors as a benchmark for the ideal candidate. Therefore, the best interviewers end up looking and sounding a whole lot like the company employees that they already have. So they have the right attitude and the right behavior. So you want to think of those things before you actually interview and then try to figure out how to reflect those on camera. So for example, if you want a call center job, some behaviors might be that you're very supportive and you're patient and you're pleasant and you're encouraging. Or if you're in a tech job, you want to show the behaviors where you can solve problems, you're tenacious, you're curious, you're self-motivated, and you're influential. And as I say here, you want to thoroughly practice and practice and practice until you can show Dot who is boss and get that interview, get that job. So here.
So Donna, let me ask a question first. Are you going to be able to stay on past 2 o'clock today?
I can, yes.
Okay, because whatever questions that don't get answered, maybe I'll just follow them up with you after, because I think we have a lot of questions and you can answer later on, okay?
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
I know someone reached out to me about contacting us on my linkedin.com/in/Donna Hook. Feel free to contact me, but we are at the point where we are at question and answer. So please go ahead.
Okay, Anupama, you want to just start reading what you have there?
Yeah, let me do that. So I captured some of the questions from the chat, so it might be easier. So hopefully these are still relevant questions. If you have already answered it, you can let us know. So Mike Rapola said, when it comes to facial recognition, What about someone who has a slur when saying words with an S sound? Does that inadvertently come across in a negative way?
Well, it really depends on how the AI is programmed, right? So if it's generic, it may have an impact, but I think on the video, if it's consistent throughout, whoever is reviewing the video will see that that's a common pattern. And they'll have to be smart enough to realize that no matter what the AI says, that the human interpretation should override those analytics.
Okay. Michelle Norton asked, what expressions are considered positive and which are negative as judged by the AI program?
Sure. Well, of course, smiling, acting naturally, showing enthusiasm, being curious, being energetic, those are considered positive. Um, showing signs of stress, worry, anxiousness, puzzled, looking puzzled. Those are signs of less positive behaviors that they're evaluating. But again, they evaluate 500,000 points. So I'm not really sure of all of their considerations, but those are some of the highlights.
Okay. Michelle has one more question. Even worse than drawing a blank, suppose you didn't quite catch the question. Can you ask for it to be repeated?
There is nobody to ask. It will be displayed on the screen for you to reread again. You have a limited amount of time to read it, but if let's say typically 30 seconds, and you have to come up with an answer when the timer starts for you to record. So even if you're not answering the right question, just say, hey, that reminds me of something else, and talk about something else. Just anything that comes to your mind so you're not drawing a blank.
All right. Nancy Aronson says, when an initial interview is done via one-way video interviewing, what percentage of candidates who are offered a position accept it? And how long on average do the people who accept positions stay at these companies?
Yeah, that is a little bit beyond the scope of what I captured data for. I don't have a good answer for that, but it is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Which I can research. Mm-hmm.
I will share all these questions with you, Donna, so you don't need to note it down. Ralph Miglior asked, any tips on how to show your personality when you are not able to get real-time feedback from the person across the table?
Well, one way to show your personality is to be so comfortable with interviewing that you just act naturally, and you can highlight why you want to work for that company in your answers. You want to show that you're a great candidate in a lot of different ways by being prepared and having great answers and being enthusiastic for the position, smiling, acting naturally.
All right. There's another question from Ralph. Can the company share these videos with other companies?
I did not read that in the terms of service, but they may have third party. They may hire out some of their functions, like through a contractor type relationship, and they may be able to share in an effort to what's the word I'm looking for? For the hiring procedure, for onboarding, for training.
All right. There are two more questions. Alexandra asks, I thought I heard earlier in this presentation that wearing glasses can negatively affect the AI score for these one-way interviews. How is that so? Is the negative connotation that the glasses will have a glare?